Well, hello everyone from Sevilla I Love at sevillailove.com. So many people have asked this question when they've been early in their loss, even a good distance out from their loss, even sometimes a couple of years, they can say, when is this pain ever going to end? And they say to me, Phil, I'm waking up in the middle of the night. I'm crying. I'm bursting out into tears at work. I can't have a conversation with my friends without having to retreat to the bathroom and cry my eyes out. What is wrong with me? you know, and the thing is, there's nothing wrong with you. Grief is something that I want to say this one thing to you, and I hope you hear me very, very clearly. Grief is not rational. Can you hear me on that? Grief is not rational. So there's nothing that can really be done to make sense of your loss, especially in the early days, because sense goes hand in hand with rationality. And so if grief is not rational, then what do we do with all of these crazy, upset, insane feelings that we have? I know in the early days of my own loss, from all of the ridiculous amount of loss I've had in my lifetime, that I had to just really set aside time to break down and lose my shit, to be quite honest, to be able to allow that energy to move through me, because there is such an important purpose of grief in our life, because life is a polarity. There's positive and negatives in everything, in all of this physical life. And so in order to move through grief, we have to allow ourselves to be with the pain rather than resisting the pain. Now, if you're new to my work, my name is Sevilla I Love. I'm a licensed therapist with over 20 years of experience. I'm a grief and loss expert because of all the ridiculous amounts of loss and grief that I've had myself by an early age. I am a spiritual intuitive, and I work with my clients to be able to get out of the sticky mud of grief and back into living a life that they truly loved to live again, and to be able to be with and make space and room for the grief in their life. Because the thing is that, even though I take private clients, and if you're interested in that, I'll put a link in this below so you can find me. But even for people who are moving through their grief, they sometimes feel like, I should be able to get over this. I should be able to go back to work. I should be able to get back to my friends. I should be able to get back to all these normal things. But the reality is, if you've had a massive loss in your life, things are never going to be the same again. They're just not. And so the task now for you is to learn how to be and live in a state of non-resistance to the new life that you've been given that you didn't ask for. Because there's a couple of roads that you can take. You can take the path of resistance. And from what I've seen from my own experience and from working with people in pain and suffering for over 20 years, actually my whole lifetime, I've been a healer my whole lifetime, doing clinical therapy for 20 years, that when we are in a state of resistance, this is where we meet the blocks to being able to actually get through the pain. When we get into a state of non-resistance and understanding what that means for our own lives, that is the space where we start to find our healing. That's the space where things become more clear to us, and then the healing becomes more rapid. But allow me to share something with you. Okay? So just today, I love to do vulnerable sharing because I think it's so important that, this is a real thing. because I'm somebody that's had so much loss in my own life, sharing that story with you, I give as a gift because I want you to know that you are not alone. Now, my husband died over 7 years ago. And today, my 10-year-old son says, "Oh, Mom, I'm watching this new show on TV." And it's about this mom who's raising the boy by herself because the dad died and he drowned. Well, that's my story. My husband drowned. My son's 10 years old, and they got this TV show on. And so he's telling me this story. And so what am I doing? I'm crying, bawling. And my son's like, "Mom, I'm sorry, don't cry." And I said, it's okay to cry because this is something we have to remember that grief is the love that we had for that person that passed on from this life that comes out of our eyes. And it releases so much more than just our love. Also, tears release stress in the body. They are physically and biologically healthy to have tears come out. And so it was my opportunity to remind my son that this is a good thing. It's okay to cry. It's okay to cry, honey. And this is 7 years out. So let me share an analogy with you that for those of you that haven't heard it, this may help you. Okay. So understand this one thing. Grief, your grief for whomever it is that you lost, or if you haven't lost a person, if it's a major life transition and that your world was flipped upside down because of a divorce or some other major big event in your life, leaving you in a state of things never being the same again ever. Okay? That's a huge loss. Different kind of loss, but still massive. So when you're in that state, understand that grief is like a ball in a box. Okay, so when you first have early grief, this ball takes up the whole damn box. There is no room for anything else but that ball. But as you begin to heal, the box gets a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger. And the ball starts to kind of move around. It's got a little space to roll around the edges. And time passes and the ball is still rolling around and the box gets bigger and bigger and sooner or later it's as big as the room. So now that ball's bouncing around the room and more time goes by and that room gets bigger and all of a sudden someday it's as big as a house and that ball's bouncing around the house. Well, guess what? One day you walk in the door, footloose and fancy free. You had a wonderful day. You got groceries in your arms. You're not thinking of a thing besides the birds and the trees and the lovely day you had. And here comes that ball bouncing down the stairs. Boom, smacks right into you. Guess what? That ball is still the exact same size that it was in the beginning when it filled up that little box. The exact same size. So there you are with the groceries in your hand, crying like a little baby. And it's been 10 years since your loss. It's been 10 years since your major life transition. How did that hit me so hard? Where did that come from? What's up with this? It's because the ball never changes size because that is grief. That is our love for the person that's crossed over. So you see that what your healing journey is doing is not getting rid of the grief. It is creating space for the grief. So the grief has more room to move. So you have more reprieve from the ball that always stays the same size. That will eventually come bouncing out and hit you when your arms are full of groceries when you're least expecting it. So if this makes sense to you, this is why I share this story with you that 7 years out, I'm crying like a baby over my loss. A couple of weeks ago, I wake up in the middle of the night. I have a dream about my mother, and I wake up bawling. I'm crying for my mommy. She's been gone 8 years. So just know that Your grief has a purpose, and the purpose of the grief, among many others, is to create this space in your life so you can learn to grow around the pain that you have experienced. So you can learn to grow around the loss that you've had in your life and to know that the healing is in your growth, not in eliminating the grief itself. So when you ask the question, when will this be over? It'll never be over because you'll never stop loving that person that left because your grief equals the love. But the dysfunction in your life and not being able to move and experience joy again and travel and have friends and maybe have a new lover or remarry or whatever it is, form new attachments, feel good inside again. That, not giving yourself that doesn't equal your love. There's a difference in that. Honoring this space for the grief. Creating space for new things to come into your life. These all honor the grief. You are capable of doing that. And as you heal, know that your space is your healing, not the elimination of the grief itself. Know that you are more powerful. You're more beautiful. You're more competent. And you are stronger than you can possibly imagine because you were created to bear and endure. And you're here for a reason. And your pain has its purpose in your life and in your growth. I'm Sevilla I Love at sevillailove.com. You can find me here or on YouTube. Have a good night.